I'm Sherry Carlson. I'm the Chief Programs Officer for Let's Grow Kids. And I'm here today to give you information about the grant opportunity to expand care for infants and toddlers. The way I'm going to structure this is I'm going to go through the entire informational session and ask that you either put your questions in the chat or hold them till the end, and then I'll answer the questions. And that way, those of you that get all the information you need, you can pop off and go around about the rest of your day. And those of you that want to stay and listen or ask questions, you can stay on for a longer period of time. So it'd be great. And just making sure you're muted. And Jen, while I start, could you get the link for the inquiry form that we can put in the chat later? That would be great.
Yep.
Thank you. Jen Severance is my co-host today. Jen is a community sports specialist with Let's Grow Kids. And Dee Dee Harris is also a Let's Grow Kids staff person that's on today. So some of you may have interacted with them. So I am going to go over the grant program, and then what I will do at the end is answer questions, and we'll also tell you the next steps if you feel the criteria of the grant meets your project or idea that you were thinking of applying for funding for. So first, I just want to let you know that there's about $690,000 in grant funds that'll be available. The first grant deadline is July 9th. So that's coming up pretty soon. I just also want to let you know that we will, at that July 9th application deadline, it is anticipated that we will award close to $500,000 of the grant money that's available. That is because of some requirements around the funding and the dates in which it needs to be obligated. So we need to have some of the funds obligated before the beginning of September. So this will be our biggest grant round, July 9th. We will have another grant round with a due date of October 18th. It'll be a smaller grant round and likely have, a little less than $200,000 available. But for some of you, that may be a better match just based on where you are in your process and thinking about your application. Some of the other criteria is that the grant funds can be used to expand or open programs, but it must include infants and toddlers in that expansion or that new program that's opening. The other, and this is a change from previous grant rounds, the other criteria that would make you eligible for a grant is if you are looking to offer non-standard hour care and would include infants and toddlers and that type of expansion. So that would mean that you're offering evening care, weekend care, overnight care, that you're looking in some way to expand your hours that you're open that would serve families who need some more maybe non-traditional childcare hours. So in that case, you don't necessarily have to be adding children, but you are going to be adding opportunity for families who may not have been able to access care. So those are the criteria. You're either adding spaces for infants and toddlers, or you're adding hours to your program. So those are the two primary criteria. And the other piece is that your expansion, whether it be your hours or your number of spaces or your startup, needs to be operational before July 1, 2022. So you have about a year to get your program up and running and open. And again, that's related to the funding source and the criteria around the funding source. So, if you're opening in this October or you're thinking of opening in March, that's great. That all fits, but you have to have enrollment before July 1 of 2022 to be eligible for these funds. So for centers, in terms of how much funds you can apply for centers, you can apply for up to $50,000. In some cases, if there's a very, very large program that you're thinking of opening with a really expanded number of spaces for infants and toddlers, you could be invited to apply for more than that. but generally up to 50,000 is the guideline for application for center-based programs. For home-based programs, that amount is up to 20,000. And again, if there was some exceptional conditions, you could be invited to apply for more. But in general, up to 20,000 would be your opportunity to apply for funds. Again, the funding is focused on birth, adding spaces or hours for birth through 35 months. That doesn't mean that your center or your project can't also include that you'll be serving preschoolers, but there has to be some expansion of the 0 to 35 months to be eligible for the funding. July 9th is the first deadline, and then there will be a second smaller grant program in October. Typically, you would hear within a couple weeks of the deadline if you've been recommended for an award. And following that, there's paperwork and there's other kinds of criteria that you may need to meet to finish the process. So who can apply for grants? So it could be for-profit childcare centers, not-for-profits. It could be, public schools. It could be community organizations. So a wide range of organizations and individuals can apply for these grant funds as long as they meet the criteria of serving infants and toddlers and expanding spaces or hours available. What can you spend the money on? So it's really broad in that sense. So you could spend it on capital improvements. So if you need to do some renovations to a space to be able to offer family childcare in your home, and you have a separate area, or you need flooring, or if you're needing to move a wall, whether it be a center, any kind, add a bathroom, to meet the criteria to offer additional programming or to start up a program. So any of those kinds of capital expenses that would be required for you to be able to offer care in your home, to offer a program in your home, or to open a center and offer care there. It's important that you think about what kinds of capital expenses are related to providing care. So in the past, we've had some requests for things like roofing expenses or, a patio. And those are things that are really nice to have, but they don't really, when it comes down to competitive, they're not really competitive. And because those are things like you would need a roof on your home, regardless of whether you provided childcare. So to be competitive, you really want to ask for things that are related really directly to serving children, whether it be in a home or in a center. So other things that you can apply for is any equipment that you would need, to serve more children or to serve children for a longer period of time. That includes fencing if you, want to have an outdoor play equipment. So both of those things are included, as well as cribs and strollers and tables and chairs and any of those kinds of things that you would need to serve children are included in that. The other costs that have been approved in the past are training costs related to program expansion. So any kinds of required trainings that you need that make staff eligible to lead groups of children or make them eligible to work in a program, or if you're training someone because you're moving from a license to from a registered to licensed home. So any costs that are related to recruitment or training of staff. In addition to that, some have taken advantage and asked for short-term salary support as you're ramping up. So, typically 4 to 6 weeks of salary support has been approved in the past by the grant review committee. So that's something else to think about, because we know as you expand or you open, you may not be at full enrollment right away. And, that you may need some funds to help cover those initial weeks as you're ramping up your program and getting families enrolled. So that's another expense that can be covered. So really, any kinds of investments that are needed to support the expansion startup or, the expansion to non-traditional hours of your program are eligible expenses, So thinking about what kinds of things are in the application, there's general information that's offered, and then some of the questions are looking to find out, like, who are you working with, or how did you kind of determine the need for your for the need for the expansion or startup. And just the actual application is an online form. So once you've met with a Let's Grow Kids staff person, or communicated individually with a Let's Grow Kids staff person, they would, and your project seems like a fit that meets the criteria, we would send you the link to the application. So that's how you get the application. But just to give you a peek into some of the things that we're asking about, we're asking about, so again, how are you working in isolation, or have you really collected some information from, other early childhood providers, your public school, like where your idea around this need in your community came from, and who's helped inform, what you're thinking about doing. Also, just talk a little bit about the shortage of childcare in your area, and what has informed you sort of make the case for the need for childcare in your area. Then we want to know what you're specifically asking for. What is it your project's going to look like? I am renovating a room and I'm going to add 6 toddlers to my program, or I'm going to open on Saturdays, and this is what I'm looking to do. So we're going to ask about that. There is a budget. We have a budget template that you fill out, and so it includes filling out what you're asking money for, as well as a timeline. The timeline for your project is really important because we need to know that you're going to be able to be open by that July 1, 2022 deadline that comes attached to this funding. And also a summary, a little description of what you're asking your funds for. So that's part of the budget template. We also are interested in just sort of the leadership for the project and the experience of the leadership of the project and personnel. So just to find out a little bit more about who's leading the project and their experience with childcare and early childhood education and those types of things, and who might be other community members that you're working with or supporting your efforts. The other things that we ask about for center-based programs is your workforce strategy. So what are your ideas around recruiting and retention for workforce? And sustainability, what is your, once you have invested your grant funds, how do you know this model, this program that you're going to offer is sustainable? What is your, maybe it's through your tuition structure or other, maybe you have some in-kind through a community, in a, for space, or what are your strategies for that? The other thing that we ask about and right up front is, have you connected with the Child Development Division? And that's something you should do, right away, because getting that process started, if you're starting up or expanding, or you want to expand your hours, is really important to get started. And there are members of the Child Development Division on the Grant Review Committee, so they're often looking and checking to make sure that there's been a connection made, because we know then there's a process and a timeline that follows that, and that's helpful in knowing that you're kind of on track to meet the timeline requirements. The other thing that we recommend is that right away you also check with any kind of zoning requirements in your area, or water permitting or wastewater, to make sure, if you've identified a building, or if it is in your home, that you're okay to move forward, because we have in the past had some situations where that has really stopped the expansion or startup dead in the tracks after learning about challenges around permitting or zoning. So we recommend you do that as one of the first items as well. Let's see. So I just want to mention that, again, for-profits are eligible for these grant funds. There is additional paperwork that for-profits need to fill out should they get an award. And that's really what allows us to give grants to for-profit programs. So that's another piece. And there's some other criteria just around, not mingling the money with other funding sources, et cetera, for-profits that we need to follow for us to be able to give for-profits funding. So if you feel like you're hearing things that feel like they're a good fit for your idea, your expansion, or your expansion of hours, or your project, your next step, if you haven't done this already, is to fill out an inquiry form, which Jen has put the link in the chat. And what that does is that triggers a Let's Grow Kids staff person to connect with you individually and talk through a little bit more about what your idea is, and then also support you with the application process. If it sounds like you're going to meet the criteria. So that walking you through, we want you to be successful in your application, helping you identify what kinds of things you might ask for that would be most competitive, how much you might ask for, giving you some guidance around how to answer some of the questions. I want to say, like, I gave you a lot of questions that are on the application, and I want to also follow up and say most of them have like a 200 word limit. So we're really not looking for pages and pages of application. We're trying to keep it a simple process so it's accessible. So that's, if it felt like overwhelming in what I was sharing, I should also share that we're really looking, for more like paragraphs of information that describe your project. Because we have Let's Grow Kids staff people work so closely with you, they help with the grant committee in explaining your project and answer a lot of questions to help us keep the application process as simple as possible. So I'm going to pause and see if any of the Let's Grow Kids team members on this Zoom call, if I've forgotten anything before we go to questions. I think we're good. All right. So if you feel you had enough information and you're good to go, then you can make sure you get in, and it's a fit for your project. Make sure you get the link and fill out the inquiry form if you haven't. The other thing I'll say is that you should hear from a Let's Grow Kids staff person within 2 or 3 days of filling out the inquiry form. So if you don't, then you could reconnect with me and just say, just checking in. Sometimes we might have someone on vacation, or there could just be a moment where we miss a name. So don't wait too long if you haven't heard from somebody. And again, that deadline is July 9th, so it's coming up pretty quickly. The application is not burdensome. So if your project is a fit, I don't see that deadline being a problem, but we would want to connect with you as soon as possible. So let's see, do we have any questions?
I don't have a question, but I'm going to jump off here, but thank you very much. I think that this is going to be a perfect fit for what I'm trying to do. So I'll be in touch soon.
Great.
Thank you so
Sarah.
much. Thank you.
Yes, that's part of the funding criteria. That thank you for bringing that up. It has to be 48-week operation, 48 weeks a year, and 50 hours per week. There will be another October 18th is the next, when we anticipate having a grant program. We will have a total of about $200,000 probably available then. Our July 9th will be our biggest, our largest grant round, and some of that has to do with the criteria of the funding that we're receiving is that it be obligated before September 1. So we will, we will have more funds available in the July application period than we will in the October time period. But October will definitely make more sense for some people whose projects may not be far enough along. Any other questions? I also want to say this isn't your last opportunity to ask questions. If you fill out the inquiry form, there will be a an opportunity to talk to Let's Grow Kids staff members about your specific project. No, the answer, so can you apply for 50 in July and 50 in October? That would be unlikely because when we meet with you, we will give you some parameters around what we feel is the maximum that you would be competitive asking for. And the only reason you may get an additional amount of funding in October is if your project like expanded wildly, or you got, instead of a 7,000 square foot place, you actually ended up with 12,000. So there would have to be some change to your original, project. If you're opening a 200 child center, we would probably invite you to apply for $100,000, in the first round. So that's really how it works. Like, we look at your project, we look at where you are, some of the expenses that are related to where you might be operating, and we give you some good parameters around how how much you could ask for and be competitive.
Sarah, we can talk about that more this afternoon because Sherry doesn't know that you're looking at 2 different sites.
That's the other thing. 2 sites is 2 applications, so that's a different, yes, Sarah, thanks.
Yes, so you might do it in 2 tiers, right? So the site that's
Right.
more turnkey ready, you might apply for
Absolutely.
in July, give you a little more time to build out your plans for the other site location that might be opening later in the year or sometime the beginning of next year, right?
Yeah. Any other questions? So you could, yeah. So if you, yep. So this, is it family childcare home? I'm trying to see who just asked me that. Family childcare home. And if you hire someone, you can take 2 extra. Is that what your question is? Yes, exactly. Yes. So if you're expanding, if a registered family childcare home, and you can add a person so that you can take more infants and toddlers, you're eligible for this grant, and you could use those funds for whatever you've identified you need. And it could be payment to that person, recruitment bonus, or it could be to cover their salary for a period of time, those types of things. Sometimes people have interests, they might have a question about funding something that we're worried won't be competitive. And what we may advise is that you look at your whole plan and request funds for something that we know has a track record of being successful. And what that can do is leave you with some funds to invest in items that may not have such a positive track record of receiving an award. So that's one of the strategies we can work with you about. Any other questions? So we just want to make sure that everyone sees the link. The deadline is July 9th. Fill out, if it's a good fit, fill out the link today. That would be great. That gives us time to get in touch with you. And, you know, if things look great, we can get you started in your application. And thank you everyone for joining, and good luck. Oh, yeah, yep.